Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy, and today we're doing some Dollar Tree DIYs for your spring home decor. For this project, I'm going to be using a plastic dome, some caulking in the tube, a stove burner cover, an empty coffee can, and a candle, and some pretty spring flowers. I was going to use these string lights, but I decided not to. You could, and I'll show you how once we get into it. But for the candle, even though it's a candle, I'm going to be using it as a glass and turning it upside down for the base of this pedestal. I'm not sure how long Dollar Tree will carry these domes, so I wanted to show you another way of using it. So it fits perfectly on top of the stove cover, so we're going to make this into a super pretty cloche. So the first thing I'm going to do is paint my stove burner cover and my candle completely white with my Waverly chalk paint, and then I'm going to take my coffee can and using a utility knife, I'm going to cut off about 2 inches from the top so that it'll fit under my dome once we get this all done. So I'm going to make sure that it sits completely flat by trimming it where I need to. And then I'm going to take my truffle chalk paint and paint that completely brown because I want this to look like one of those nude cakes that you see nowadays where there's just a little bit of frosting on there. So I want this brown to show through once I put my caulking on top of it. So I just squeezed out a bunch of that caulking and spread it all over my cake, and I used a big craft stick to smooth that out. And what's going to happen is I'm going to use the edge of my craft stick and kind of make lines so that it'll mimic the layers of a cake. And then I'm going to smooth back over it so it looks like it's frosting that's covering that back up. So I did this into a triple layer cake. Now I'm not a baker, but I think I did a pretty good job on this, and I just gave it all the texture and prettiness that I wanted to, and then finally did the top, and I made it pretty thick in there. There's a little lip at the end of my coffee can, so I was able to build that up quite a bit. That way I can take my flowers and have a little bit of the stems poking into that mastic, and then that way it's going to stay in place and I didn't have to glue it. Now these are all just scraps from my greenery scrap bin and flowers that I already had, and so I'm just tucking those in there, and if there's any place where a flower is not going to dig into that mastic, then I can just hot glue that onto the top. And then once I got all of my flowers in place, I took some scrap leaves and just cut those apart from the stem and then tucked those right in under my flowers. These were a really pretty shade of green and weren't shiny like some of the leaves you find on the Dollar Tree stems. So I always save the leaves that I think look pretty in my scrap bin for use on other projects. And then once the mastic is completely dry, I'm going to take my white chalk paint and lighten that up. The mastic dries a little bit off-white, but I wanted this bright white to match with my pedestal. So I'm just going to lighten that up with a little bit of that paint, but I don't want it to be completely covered. And then I'm going to take some all-purpose adhesive and some hot glue and place my glass right on the bottom of my stove burner cover, and our pedestal is done. Now I got 70 questions in my last video about how to get that stinking sticker off of this dome. So I wanted to actually show you how slowly you need to pull in order to get it off without ripping. And I shouldn't have done this with messy fingers because it looks like the paint on my fingers is the sticker ripping off, but it's not. So I just used my CRICUT spatula to get one corner pulled up, and then I'm just going to go super slowly to pull that all the way off. And you want to give this dome, because it's pretty flimsy, a little bit of security by using your hand to keep it in place or keep it flat so that you can pull that sticker off. And then if any of that paper doesn't come up, just take your spatula again and just pull it up, and eventually it'll all come off. So I wanted to make the topper of this dome a little bit different than my last one, so I really had to scrounge around, and I found this little Dollar Tree lantern, and I'm going to take it apart and then using some cutters, I took off the plastic pieces that were attached because I just wanted the base of this. It's plastic and so it's really pretty thin, so I was able to do this pretty well, but it did leave little holes when I put the two pieces back together, so we'll address that in just a second. So I'm just going to hot glue these two pieces back together, and then I'm going to paint it completely white using my white chalk paint. And then I took one of the little styrofoam bunnies, painted that white as well because that's going to go on top of this. Now in my last video I used a shower curtain ring and wrapped it in jute twine. I'll put that video linked in the description box below, but I really wanted to give you guys another pretty option of what you can do for the top of this dome. So my little bunny's fanny wasn't quite big enough to cover the hole at the top of this base, so I just found a round piece of wood that fit perfectly on top of there and hot glued it on and painted it also. And then once my bunny was dry, I'm gonna take some truffle chalk paint and give it a dry brush coverage so that it looks distressed and super pretty. And then to cover those holes on the side, I'm taking this Dollar Tree ribbon and then I'm going to hot glue that just on that one layer so that it gives it a little bit of cuteness, but mainly covers up those holes. And I used this twine trim because it has a lot of give and will go around that circular edge, because regular ribbon, it'll kind of bunch up and crumple up and it won't go down flat, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to take my base piece, glue that to the top of my cloche, and then put my bunny right on top of that. Now I have to give a huge shout out to a sweet viewer, Mish P, who told me in my last video that she went to her Dollar Tree and could only find one cloche left and it was broken, so she had to order a whole case online and ended up making 29 of them for her women's church group and her 4 adult children. And for her kids, she actually used their first baby Bibles in place of the mini Dollar Tree Bibles that I used in that video. So I thought that was so amazing. And I absolutely love to see the projects that you all make from something I've made here. And I know other viewers love to see them too. So if you go to our Facebook group page, the Dollar Tree Sparrow's Nest, you can connect with other sweet viewers and share your projects and see what others have made. And it's just a really fun little community of crafters and believers. And I just really love it. And I hope you like it too. For this Dollar Tree DIY, I'm using 2 framed signs, 2 oval wood plaques, one smaller than the other, and then a wood palette thingy from the Crafter Square. I'm not really sure what you call those. So I took my 2 signs and removed the foam roses and the little dot of glue, and that always leaves a little tear in the paper. And if you're a returning viewer, you know that I usually use the back sides of my Dollar Tree signs because they're nice and clean. But when I use these, they have a hanger that's embedded all the way through to the other side. So instead, I covered the fronts with some thick craft paper. And quick tip, some wrapping paper rolls use paper instead of a tube, and it's more like a cardstock and thicker than paper. So I always keep those around because what's our motto? It's not hoarding if you use it. So once I measured and I cut out my 2 rectangles, I'm going to roll it loosely in the reverse direction to get it to lay flat and to give it some textury goodness. I was going to crumple it up, and if you use regular craft paper, you could do that. But since this is thicker, it would have been too textury, and I think my vinyl lettering probably would have been too bumpy. So I glued those onto my signs with a regular glue stick and then painted them white. And I want these to resemble rock or stone, so I'm leaving some of that brown peeking through. I also start with really thin coats because when I'm painting on a textured surface, there might be a look that I like better than what I have in my brain. So you can always add more paint, you just kind of can't take it off. So I did go up and down in a vertical motion to kind of cover up more of that brown. And I just think it looks so pretty and natural rock looking. So now I'm going to take my plaques, and I pulled off the jute twine hanger off of the big plaque. And then on this palette thingy, I'm going to try and break this apart. It was a little bit harder than I thought, so I used my scissors to break those apart. I'm going to be making a cross, so I need to cut those down to get it to the right dimensions that I want for my signs. Then on my plaques, I had to figure out how big to make my tomb. I'm going to take the smaller one and place it a little bit over to the right so that it looks like it's part of the tomb opening. And then I'm going to mark where I need to cut those. And then I'm going to take these outside and cut them down on my miter saw. It ended up being right about at half. So if you do this, you actually can get 2 tombs out of 1 plaque. Well, it's actually 2 plaques, but you know what I mean. So then I'm going to take my Waverly wax in antique. I want my back rock to be a little bit lighter, so I'm going to lighten up my Waverly wax with a little bit of white and some gray, whatever was on my palette, and just blend that in and make it nice and uneven. And then you can see here I cut all of my pieces, and then I'm going to glue my smaller plaque to the top of my larger one and make sure that it's flush at the bottom. And then I'll put my cross together too using hot glue. And then I'm going to replace the backing into my frames, and then I'll place both of those at the bottom of my signs. And once I got those on there, I thought it would be really pretty just to leave them the way they are with that empty space above. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put some words on it using my CRICUT Explore Air 2. And I cut out the words Friday's Disappointment for one sign, and then on the other one is Sunday's Empty Tomb. And that's a line that I absolutely love. It's a song by Brandon Lake called Rattle. And you may have noticed that in my description box below on all of my videos, I try to leave an inspirational worship song of some sort that just happens to move me so that you guys can enjoy it while you're crafting too. And here it is all finished, and I just love how these turned out, and I love the message. I'm really happy with the background and how rough and natural looking it is with all that textury goodness, but I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. For this Dollar Tree DIY, I'm going to be using 3 tin planters, a paper towel holder, and some nylon zip ties. So as you can see, there's a seam on these planters, so I want to make sure that I put that towards the middle, and I'm going to take my crocodile and make a hole right in the back. So I'm just going to take my zip tie and feed it through that hole, and then go around my paper towel holder, pull it back through that hole, and then attach my zip tie together, and then cut off the excess. And I'll do the same thing with the other 3, but I have to mark where those holes are going to go so that they'll all 3 be equal on the stand. And I get a lot of viewers asking me where to get this crocodile, so I do have it linked in my Amazon store, which is in the description box below, and you'll find that in the list called Tools. And actually on my 2nd and 3rd tins, I didn't even move the twine out of the way. It went through the tin and the twine. You just have to use a pokey tool to get that out after each punch. And I'm actually going to be using this piece in an upcoming organizational video, so we'll use that in that video, but for this video we're going to be filling it with some fun spring projects. So for this I'm going to use 3 canvas material pieces, some batting, some greenery, and some ribbon, and I'm just taking my batting and rolling it into a cone to make the shape of a carrot. And then I took my canvas piece and I have the good side facing up because I want the back side to be what shows. So I'm just going to use some hot glue and get that batting laid down on top of my canvas, and then I'll take the bottom corner and fold it up and glue it down so that I have a covered point at the end, and then I'll roll that over and cut off the corner and then make a little seam, hot glue that down, and then continue rolling it until I get a cute little shape of a carrot. And then I'm going to take a piece of jute twine and just tie that around the top. And then for the greenery, I'm using some boxwood from Walmart, and I'm just going to cut a few pieces off and then tuck that inside of my batting and then cut off the top edge of that canvas. And then to give them some cuteness, I'm going to take some ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I have some burlap, some grosgrain, and some jute trim. And I'm just going to fold those in thirds to make sweet little bows, and then tie them all together with some jute twine, dovetail the ends, and then tie that to the top part of my carrot. And I'm going to be making a total of 3 of these, and on one of them I had some polka dotted burlap ribbon, and then I also had some crystal beads that I took off of an egg garland from the Dollar Tree, so I just fed those onto that jute twine at the bottom and tied a knot so they'd stay on. And these are also perfect to display on a tray or just by themselves in a little bunch. I'll show you what they look like in a little basket later on. So for our second tin, I'm going to dress up this little bunny that I got from the Dollar Tree. He's so adorable. I'm going to take off his bow and redress him in some coordinating ribbons. And I'm just doing the same thing that I did with my carrots, but just on a smaller scale so that it fits around his neck. And then I decided that his nose was a little too bright, so I just took some white chalk paint and lightened that up, and I did his ears and his little feet. So now for our third tin, I'm going to take some eggs, and this project kind of went south on me, and you'll see why in a minute, but and I know you'll agree too, but I'm just taking some puffy dots and some beads. These are all self-adhesive, and I didn't even use hot glue or anything. And then once I did different designs on each of my eggs, I'm going to go back in with my chalk paint, and I used whites and then some beiges, and then I went back and highlighted some of those beads with either a darker or a lighter shade, however you want to do it. I think this would be really pretty in some fun colors, but I was trying to keep this neutral. So that'll come back and bite me later. So now I'm taking these clothespin chalkboards, and I'm just going to use my paint pen and write eggs and bunnies and carrots, all things spring, not Easter. And then I'm going to clip those to each of my tins because, as you know, in farmhouse decor, we always like to mark what's inside of each of our containers. So after I get these done, I'm going to take a couple of Happy Fall scrap signs, and these are from those signs from the Dollar Tree, and when I use the boards, I'll pull these off and set them aside in case I need them, and in this case I needed them. So I'm going to take my chalk paint and paint them white. I actually started with plaster, but then it was clashing a little bit, so I put white on top of it. And then I'm going to take some ballet slipper paint and do some swishes on there so it kind of looks like a watercolor type. I don't know. It's just, I thought it was cute. And so after I do that, I'm going to write Hello Spring on each of those. And I use just a regular lettering for hello. And then on spring, I'm going to do it in my cursive writing. And then I'll go back and make the downstrokes of each of those letters in a bit thicker line so that it looks like a faux calligraphy. And I have a video that has the full tutorial and exactly how to do that, but I'll have it linked in the description box below. But it's really simple. You're just going everywhere you would go down as you're writing. You're just going to make that a little bit thicker, and it makes your handwriting just look fancy, I think. And I also wanted to make sure when I added that pink, the reason I was doing that was to match the bunny nose and ears and feet because it was just sticking out and looked out of place. So I wanted to add some more pink, and I'll add some more pink again in just a second. So I'm going to start filling my buckets, and I took a couple of plastic bags to get some stuff raised. I put my carrots in one of them, and then I just took some Excelsior, or I think it's called Excelsior, and I put my eggs in one of them, and then I took some Spanish moss, put it in another one, and I'm going to put my bunny in that one. But if you can see my eggs, as pretty as they are, I just think it looks like a big can of measles or chicken pox. I don't know. But because there's no color, it looks terrible. I know. And you guys don't even tell me because it'll hurt my feelings, but I already know. And then I took my sign and then I glued those pieces together, left the middle open, and then slid it on the handle of my paper towel holder. So here's where I'm adding some pink to those eggs, and I just did 3 of them because I didn't want too many bumpity bumps together. It just, I don't know, it kind of grossed me out. And then I'll add those into that other bucket. And then I took some super light pink roses from the Dollar Tree and stuck those in the middle, and it's done. And here's my buckets of springy goodness all together, and I think it's so pretty. I love these colors. Again, I didn't go all neutral because it didn't look right, but sometimes you just can't do without color. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!